watching Exit 1055.
Hi, I'm Richard Rose. Welcome to Exit 1055. Well, it's a battle of wills that's now spilled into the courts, affecting thousands of Nassau County workers and hundreds of thousands of taxpayers, which is where the big budget mess in Nassau is now headed. We'll hear from the head of one of the key unions trying to stave off big cuts for his employees. Plus, TV 10 to 55's Carolyn Gussoff will tell you about an amazing young woman who survived a lightning strike. Then they're a throwback to America's past, but they're thriving in popularity throughout Long Island farmers markets. We'll tell you what you can find there and why they've become so appealing. But we're going to begin today with the latest in the deficit drama in Nassau, where county officials are trying to force unions to accept some big cuts, layoffs, and increased health care contributions to solve the budget black hole that they're facing. Joining us now is John Jaronczyk. He is the president of the Nassau County Sheriff's Corrections Officers Union. Welcome to the show, Mr. Jaronczyk.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, for people who are not sure what the Corrections Officers Union is, explain that for us.
We're a law enforcement union made up of 1,000 correction officers through the rank of correction captain at the Nassau County Correctional Center.
So primarily work at the Nassau County Jail.
Solely work at the Nassau County Correctional Center. We also transport inmates back and forth to the courthouses in Nassau County and also throughout the state to other prisons and throughout the state.
So you're one of the unions that are, you know, sort of at war with the county executive over what should be done, and it's spilled into the courts. Explain what's going on there and what the issue is.
Well, back on May 21st, County Executive Mangano submitted a bill to the legislature. It was Local Bill 315-12, and that gave him the ultimate power to modify contracts, to reduce or eliminate employee benefits, and it was passed that day by the Nassau County Legislature.
Basically by the Republican majority.
Yes, it was a 10-0 Republican majority. The Democrats did not vote, and there was one member of the Republican caucus that was not present in the room.
He was sick, and they brought him into another room.
They had him in the back room. We are challenging that action in a state court, yes.
Meanwhile, what happened with the $41 million in cuts? Because that also was an issue that was brought up in court, and there was a recent decision. That's ongoing, right?
Yes, that bill that was passed on May 21st was not signed by the county executive until June 18th or June 19th. We returned to federal court. My union, along with the CSEA union and the 3 police unions, all filed separate actions inside federal court in front of Judge Spat. Judge Spat combined all of those cases into one legal proceeding. On June 20th, we were before him seeking to get a temporary restraining order. Our lawyers made the arguments on behalf of why we needed a temporary restraining order, and at the conclusion of the hearing, the judge had the county consent that they will not implement any action of that law until he makes his final ruling.
Right, which is going to be later this month or perhaps early August.
It should be later on in July or the beginning of August. The county had until July 5th to submit their papers. We have until July 19th to respond.
Right. So that's all the legalese that's going on here. But let's talk about the bigger issue. You know, the county executive says, look, I have no choice. I have to unilaterally do these cuts. There are bills we have to pay. The Democrats won't give me the votes that I need to borrow the money because they're mad about the redistricting plan that's out there. You know, does he have another choice in your view?
Well, listen, County Executive Mangano was elected to you know, run the county, but he can't. He's not a king. He has to follow the laws, and there are contracts in place. And if he's looking to have concessions from the unions, he should sit down at the negotiating table and call us to the negotiating table and have us sit down and negotiate.
Well, have you offered to sit down with the county executive yourself?
He has not called our union at all.
So you're waiting for him to call you?
Absolutely. We have a contract through 2015. You know, he doesn't have the power to just. You know, he has an obligation to, he can't impair those contracts. If he wants us to negotiate, we'll sit down and negotiate.
Well, you know, these are tough times for public employees all across the country, tens of thousands of them, hundreds of thousands of jobs in jeopardy, tens of thousands already laid off across this country. There are polls that show that Americans, you know, facing difficult times themselves, many of them having lost their jobs, lost their homes, they're taxed up to here. They're not that sympathetic to some of the arguments that unions are making. They think you should come to the table and make some concessions, especially in terms of the health care contributions.
Well, absolutely. My union alone, we have made concessions in 2009. We have made concessions in 2010. We have made concessions in 2011.
Give me an example of what you've already given them.
We actually, right now, our workers are frozen in wage and step. So from 2010 through present, our starting workers start off at $30,000 a year, and they've been frozen in that step for 2.5 years now.
So compared to past years, of course, it's not as good, but you know, you go to a job fair right now and you see 2,000 people standing in line to try to get a job, some of them with advanced degrees, and they're willing to take entry-level jobs, and for them, $30,000 would be a lot. It's part of the reason why there's not a lot of sympathy for that argument. Isn't it better to, you know, have some job and take some cuts rather than face the chopping block?
You know, being a correctional officer is a tough job. It's probably the toughest job in law enforcement. And our starting workers start off at $30,000 a year. And they're facing violent felons. They're being assaulted. They're coming down with MRSA.
Let me stop you there. Describe what's going on at the jail. Well, what is the staffing situation? I know that's another part of your dispute with the county.
Back in January of this year, County Executive Magano and Sheriff Sposato demoted 30 frontline supervisors as a budget savings inside the jail.
And they say they have the authority to do that.
They have the authority under Civil Service Law Section 80 to abolish positions, but our position is that you can't put a price on public safety, and those supervisors serve a vital, integral part in the safe running of that jail.
What's the ratio of, you know, county jail employees, your union, your members, versus the inmate population?
My union right now is just under 1,000 officers. At our highest point, we've been up to about 1,080, almost 1,100. We're down under 1,000, so we're already short-staffed.
So you're over 100 less than you're supposed to be?
Correct. Correct. The inmate count right now is a daily ebb and flow. We are housing federal inmates from federal institutions. We are housing Suffolk County inmates. But right now, our inmate population count is somewhere around 1,500.
Now, is that all regulated by the law? Because, you know, I've been in done stories at a lot of prisons and jails in various states around the country, and I've seen numbers that are much worse than that. How does that compare? I mean, are they in a dangerous situation in your opinion?
Absolutely. Every day an officer goes inside that jail, he's putting his life in danger. We have officers that are working in housing areas where they're outnumbered 60 to 1. So, you know, you can't go by the number of inmates in that jail and the total number of officers in there, because they don't all work at the same time, and they all work different jobs where they transport inmates, they work in medical, and there's different shifts. They work rotating shifts throughout, you know, 3 shifts a day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
And there have been some well-publicized suicides at the jail, and the family saying that there hasn't been adequate supervision or care for the inmates. So does it cut both ways, this situation?
You know, Sheriff Sposato has responded by cutting training and cutting supervision and cutting the medical staff inside that facility.
Well, what do you expect the county executive to do, though? Give me an example of what you think he could do to really get, you know, an agreement here between all of the unions, because you're in this in league with several of the unions, the police unions, the civil service employees union.
It's the county executive's job to figure out a way to get out of this fiscal mess. But he can't keep coming back to labor and balancing the budget on the backs of the 5 labor unions. He needs to come up with a comprehensive plan. He has to have the Republican majority in the legislature on board with it. He has to have the Democrats on board with it. And he has to sit down with the unions and negotiate those concessions. He can't just impose a law that's going to give him the right to impair contracts. That's against the U.S. Constitution.
So the next step is the court action. That's where it stands right now?
Yes, we are going forward on that.
Well, we'll be watching this. It hasn't been an easy situation for anyone in Nassau County, but we appreciate you coming in today and explaining it to us. John Jaronczyk, head of the Nassau Corrections Officers Union, primarily running the jail. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
And up next for you, we'll have the